Hey guys, welcome back. I've got another video today breaking down another game that I played recently yesterday. And if you guys watched my previous videos of my game breakdowns, you might suspect that I never lose chess games because all my other videos are wins. But that is actually, in fact, not the case. I do lose a lot of chess games. And this game today that I'm going to be showing you is an example of that. And I think it was very educational for me going through this game after the game ended and I lost, and I learned some things, and I wanted to share that with you guys, and hopefully you find it as educational as I did. So I played with the white pieces here, and I started with e4, e5, knight f3, and d6 for my opponent, and this is known as the Philidor defense for black. And a lot of times I put my bishop on b5 here, but in this position it doesn't really make sense to do so because the knight's not on c6, and if I play my bishop here, they could just kick me out with a pawn move. So it doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to put my bishop on c4, preparing to castle, and just, developing a piece. So my opponent played bishop to e6, immediately searching for a trade here of bishops. And I didn't think there was a great way to defend this bishop. I could push a pawn up, but that would kind of screw up my pawn structure. I could play knight to a3, but it doesn't look like a good move putting your knight on the corner here. So I just went ahead and traded bishops right off the bat, and you can see that my opponent now has double pawns here. So that's great, and I play c3, preparing d4 and attacking in the center. And my opponent plays knight to f6, so he's putting pressure now on the e4 pawn that I've got there. And I did not make this move, but what I should have done is actually played queen to b3. And what this actually does is it's attacking two undefended pawns in my opponent's territory here. And you can see, say if I take, or let's say black just goes ahead and takes the pawn there. If I can hit this king with check, I'm winning a pawn. If he blocks this way with the bishop, that's great. If he blocks with the queen, I can actually make my way all the way around and take this pawn over here and threaten even more damage on that side. But a better move is probably just taking this b7 pawn because these two pieces are not connected. They're not defending each other, so this pawn's under attack right now. He's got to move this knight out of the way. And obviously, if he moves his knight to either a6 or c6, I'm just going to go ahead and take the knight with check again here. So that wouldn't be a great move, but if he just goes ahead and moves the knight to d7, well, guess what? Here's other knights hanging as well. So that was a very tempting or a very good move to play if I would have spotted it, but instead I played d3, and you'll notice this isn't my plan from the beginning. I wanted to actually play d4, but this is kind of a concession I made here, expecting to, after I castle and after I get the rook out, defend this pawn and then push my d pawn. So that was my plan. He plays c5, and now I played queen to b3, believe it or not. So I'm attacking these two undefended pawns now, but there's an issue, or it doesn't really work the way it did before because he had played c5. So now in playing c5, all he has to do is move this queen forward, and he's defending both pawns. Otherwise, this pawn would have been blocking here. So a move too late for me, but still a good move. I'm tying his queen up, so I'm okay with it. I castle, and my opponent plays h6, kind of stopping this bishop pin here. And I move my rook out, defending this pawn so that I can move forward with these pawns here. Okay, another pawn move for my opponent. And I play in the middle. I play d4. My opponent takes, and I take back. If he takes, I'm going to just take with my knight. So he actually plays, moves his bishop to e7, preparing to castle on his side of the board. And okay, I keep developing. I see this move here, which I'm going to play next move, but I wanted to continue to develop a little bit before I thrust it forward with some more pawn pushes. And he castles. So now I play e5. So if he takes, I can take back, and I'm now attacking this knight. So he actually moves the knight out of the way, but he moves the knight out of the way to the wrong spot. He could have moved backwards, which doesn't look great because your knight's not in the game anymore. And I've got the center here. But he moves forward, and now the knight's kind of trapped. So I play h3. Can't go here. He can't go here because I'm going to take him. So he does the only thing, he can't go here, obviously, so he does the only logical move, I guess, from this point, which is just taking my pawn with the knight, sacking the knight. So I go ahead and take with my king, and now he actually sacks his rook for my knight. And this is my first mistake of the game. Let's see. I took less than 10 seconds to make this move. I take with the pawn, which is a mistake, which might be obvious to you guys looking at this now. I should have taken with the king, but I take with the pawn, and now he hits me with the check here with his bishop. So he's basically skewering, as they say, my king and my rook. So I move my king out of the way, he takes the rook, and I recapture. Now, that was a mistake by me, but I'm still up because he still had to sack his knight at the beginning of this whole exchange. So I'm actually up a piece for a pawn right now. So it's important to keep in mind, because I am up material, I'm winning, and there's no need to rush or to do unnecessary things when you're up in the game. You know, you can take your time, you can trade and get in a favorable position and hopefully win the end game from there. But as we'll see, this isn't exactly what I ended up doing in this game. So, okay, he plays d5, and I move my bishop here. I want to get my rook out. I was even thinking about moving my rook to the g file here as a potential open file, kind of bearing down on his king. But also, this pawn was undefended. So I wanted to defend that guy, and we trade pawns here. So great, I'm still up 2 points. I'm still up a piece for a pawn. Okay, now he moves his knight forward, attacking my bishop. Undefended bishop. And I move my queen to a4. My idea is, okay, if you want to take my undefended bishop, fine, but I'm going to take your queen. So, not a great trade for my opponent. And he moves his queen out of this pin that I've created. And now I've got my rook to c1. So not only was my queen pinning, but it's also defending the bishop here if he decides to take it. So now I move my rook into the game and I line it up with the queen, and he moves the queen again. And I move my knight backwards to e2. And my idea here was to get my knight onto g3 and support this pawn push here is my plan. Also, I'm defending the bishop for the time being as well. So, okay. My opponent pushes b5 and I move my queen back, lining up this battery here. It is a threat. It's pretty easy to defend, but one of the good things is I know my opponent's going to play next move. He's got to play rook to c8. So, you know, keeping him in check. So now I push my pawn forward, and now I have this idea that I've got going on here. Okay, he pushes his pawn, and I move my knight. So if he takes the bishop, I'm going to take the rook with check. He's got to take back, and I'm going to take his queen there. So I'm going to be ahead in that trade as well. I'm going to be just fine in that position, so I'm not really worried about that. Okay, but now he moves his knight back, and this is actually a very good move. He opens up an attack on my queen, which I have to respond to. He's also defending this pawn push here, even though I've got my queen and my knight bearing down on it at the moment. I think this was a great backwards knight move, which are often tough to see because people don't really often want to move their knights backwards. But good move by my opponent. And I just move my queen to d4, keeping her options open here, obviously defending the rook. Expecting him to maybe take the rook, even though he's down. You don't want to trade when you're down, but let's see what he does. He just plants his rook on c4, attacking the bishop. So I just went ahead and traded because I'm up. So I trade, and he recaptures. Now he's got this pawn kind of a little bit more advanced in my space here. And here, let's see, I had 8 minutes on the clock. So I don't know what I don't know what the panic was here for me. But I was feeling a little uncomfortable after some of these moves. I felt some pressure. I felt like he was building on something. And I thought I had a great move here. I said, see, my knight's already kind of in the vicinity of his king. I can swing my queen over rapidly, obviously, with this move that I made here. And I'm threatening a couple things. What I'm threatening really is knight to h5. And because if I play the knight to h5 here and he doesn't respond, you know that's going to be a mate. I'm also threatening this undefended pawn here. So I felt like it was a good move at the time. And it was okay. But it turns out there's a great move for black here. It's just planting his queen directly on d5, because black is now defending that pawn. He's also attacking my undefended piece, which is this bishop here. And I could have maybe moved my knight back. I could have moved my bishop, probably not to c3, because then he's just going to pawn push. But what I did was, okay, you can attack my undefended bishop here, but I'm going to play knight to h5. And this is kind of really where this whole thing fell apart, because I didn't continue the thought process of whether this attack was really going to work or not. I saw that there was a lot of pressure here for me. I felt good about it, but obviously didn't do all my math, because didn't really end up working. But obviously my opponent's got to respect this. Now the move I didn't see, okay, first he checks me a couple times. And obviously the thing is, if he just takes my bishop, that's checkmate. So he can't take my undefended piece yet. And I thought that was really what was going to keep me winning this game. And he continues to check me. But now he plays this brilliant move, knight to f5. And this move is so great because, number one, it's defending checkmate, okay? So that's great, but it's at the same time setting up checkmate for me, against me. So it's accomplishing two game-swinging things for my opponent. And that's a move that I didn't really see coming, or I don't want to say possible, but I didn't see this, because this really totally just quelched my attack, just stopped my attack in its tracks. So now I've got to figure out, okay, if I don't create a very severe threat here, I've got to either defend this or do something just as dangerous to my opponent. And really what I should have done is continue defending, because again, I'm up material here. And for some reason that thought process kind of evaded me. So what I did was play knight f6. And now obviously this pawn is pinned, so this pawn cannot take the knight at the moment. But the issue is he moves his king out of the way. Now if he moved it to other squares, I could still have an attack going here, depending on where he moves his king to. But he moves his king to a good position, f7. Now, I saw this check here, but all he's got to do is push his pawn forward. And I can't take this pawn. So let's say I go here, he pushes his pawn forward. I can't take this pawn because this knight's defending. So this attack basically dies at this point if I do that. So what do? I play bishop to c5. So I'm trying to keep the pressure on here, and you can see I actually spent 3 minutes or so just on this move, because I knew I was trying to find something, because I overextended a little bit here and I really couldn't get the reins back on. So I play bishop to c5. I feel like it's creating possibly some threats along this file, and also I am obviously getting out of the way of the queen here. And let's see, still defending this checkmate with my queen. So that was my idea. But of course, now that this king's moved out of the way, guess what? This pawn's not pinned anymore. So he can just take the pawn. So obviously right here in this moment, I've got two pieces under attack, undefended, and I can't defend both of them at the same time in this situation. So I give up the knight, and I check him. Now he can't push the pawn forward, but there's just nothing left to do in this position for me. I'm not defending checkmate anymore. I continue the checks. He takes it, and now there's just nothing for me to do. I can't check here, can't check here. Obviously can't check here with the queen. If I check with the bishop, the queen's just going to take it. So this attack just totally fizzled out for me. And I think I did make another move. I hung my queen in panic, full panic mode here. So that ended the game. I resigned after my queen went down. But I think the interesting thing here was, because my opponent I felt like my opponent played tough. He played well after being down, the piece for the pawn. I was winning the game, but my opponent was playing good. He was playing great moves. He was threatening me, and I felt some type of pressure here, which really was unnecessary. I made some good moves here, but just could not complete the victory. And I think the sum of some of these pressuring moves that my opponent made possibly caused me to kind of jump forward here and make this unnecessary queen move. And then on top of that, this more unnecessary knight move, putting my knight in the corner, committing to this attack where it just wasn't really, it wasn't a good attack. It wasn't possible if I had calculated it fully. So I think the lesson here for me was when you're up, play logical, smart chess. Don't do anything crazy. And don't put all your eggs in one basket on this attack here that I had going. I could have just defended the bishop. I could have, kept my pieces in order, kept my pieces coordinated together, and played a slow, methodical game. But I chose not to do that, and my opponent capitalized. So that was basically the game. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and I guess I'll just see you next time.